Oh, hey, this is One Big Darkroom, and I'm Juniper-Quinn. Thank you for being here. This podcast is a space where we bring hidden things into the light, stories of survival, healing, and the darker corners of life that too often get ignored. I have a lot to say today, and before we get into it, I want to make sure that you've read the trigger warnings. If you missed them, here they are again. I'll be talking about stalking, rape, murder, and I'll also touch on sensitive sexual content. If you don't feel up for that today, and you'd still like to hear the part of this episode about the justice system, you can skip ahead to the timestamp listed in the notes. If you're ready and comfortable continuing, let's get into it. A theme that has been coming up a lot lately is dark romance. But what is that exactly? Dark romance is a subgenre that blends love stories with elements of danger, obsession, and power dynamics. Instead of rainbows and butterflies, dark romance takes elements of danger, obsession, and control and places them inside a romantic or sexual relationship. They take tropes that in real life would be terrifying, and they twist them into stories that readers can't seem to put down. It's not just a corner of the internet anymore. Dark romance is exploding in popularity. On BookTok, the book side of TikTok, it's one of the fastest growing categories. Hashtag dark romance has racked up billions of views. Titles like Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton sell out on Amazon, dominate Kindle charts, and spread like wildfire in online communities. Readers are building fandoms, making edits, and debating the morality of these characters. What's clear is that people are drawn to the intensity and the danger, the push and the pull, between fear and desire. Which brings us to one of the most talked about and trigger-filled examples in the genre, the one I mentioned earlier, Haunting Adeline. This trigger warning is at the beginning of the book. I will read it to you. The contents of this book are very dark, with triggering situations such as non-dub con between the main characters, graphic violence, human trafficking, child slave trade, stalking, child trafficking, child sacrifice, mentions of child death, kidnapping, near-death situations, and explicit sexual situations. There are particular kinks such as gunplay, somnophilia, bondage, breath play, and degradation. All right. If you weren't familiar with some of those words, same. Let me define them for you. A non-dub con is a scenario involving non-consensual sex, so non-con, which is distinct from dubious consent, dub con, in that a person unquestionably, physically, and or verbally refuses to participate in a sexual act but is forced to anyway. Somnophilia is a paraphilia involving sexual arousal from engaging in sexual activity with a person who is asleep or unconscious. Breath play, or erotic asphyxiation, is the intentional restriction of oxygen to the brain for the purposes of sexual arousal. Okay, now that we have all of that covered, I have not personally read this series due to my own triggers, but this is a summary from what I've gathered thanks to the internet. The story of Haunting Adeline centers on Adeline, a writer who moves into her grandmother's Gothic-style home. There, she uncovers pieces of a hidden past about her great-grandmother, who, in a shocking parallel, was murdered by her own stalker. Not long after moving in, Adeline realizes she has a stalker too. Roses show up at the door, anonymous notes, threatening messages from unknown numbers, and we're given the story from two perspectives, Adeline herself and the man who is stalking her. At first, she's afraid, but over time, the fear twists into something else. She starts to feel attracted to him. Zaid, her stalker, is painted as both the protector and the predator. He's powerful, intelligent, and always one step ahead. He pushes against her consent, but the narrative frames it as sexual tension and passion. In one of the videos I watched while trying to understand the book, The reviewer, who, in my opinion, seems maybe a little too excited, actually said, "Why do I kind of want to stalk her too?" To complicate things, Zaid is portrayed as a vigilante. He's not just a stalker. He's also out there killing the bad guys, which invites readers to see the good in him, to rationalize his obsession, and somehow be protective. But here's the bigger point. This is romanticizing the villain. The story pushes us to hold conflicting perspectives. He's terrifying, but he's attractive. He's controlling, but he's smart. If Zaid weren't written as good looking, if he were average or unattractive, this would read as an entirely different kind of story. So why? Why are stories like this so captivating? Psychologically, dark romance allows people to explore dangerous themes from a place of safety. The adrenaline of fear, the intensity of obsession, the thrill of the power dynamic, it all gets packaged in a way where the reader can walk away without any real consequences. Obsession is about control. It's about one person needing to possess the other, often at the expense of their freedom, their boundaries, and sometimes their safety. It's usually fueled by insecurity and fear. If they can keep you close enough, you can't leave. Love, on the other hand, is uninhibited. Love doesn't take away freedom, it gives more. Love respects boundaries, honors individuality, and celebrates growth. My dad always told me that two halves don't make a whole in a relationship. You need two people, two complete beings who choose to stand beside each other. It's not about someone completing you. You should already be complete on your own. That's the difference between obsession and love. Obsession is a half, searching desperately for another half, needing the person just to survive. But love is one whole, choosing another whole. It's about wanting someone beside you, not needing them to fill in your missing pieces. For those of us who grew up around trauma, it's easy to confuse. The roller coaster of obsession can feel like passion. The absence of safety can feel like excitement. That's why separating fantasy from reality and obsession from love is so critical. Because in fiction, obsession makes for a page turner. But in real life, obsession can take everything from you. Now, to be clear, I'm not shaming anyone for what they like to read or fantasize about. Fiction is a safe place to explore dangerous ideas. Stories like this can be exciting because they let us dip into something dark without actually living it. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a book or a trope or even a fantasy. The key is knowing where the line is. So why does all this matter? Because obsession framed as romance isn't just a fictional trope. It happens in real life. And when it does, it's not thrilling or sexy or mysterious. It's terrifying and dangerous. I don't watch true crime documentaries anymore, nor do I listen to the podcasts. It became too close to home for me. When I saw an article about Stalking Samantha, I knew it would be important for me to watch. The documentary follows Samantha, who, when this story started, was 21 years old and a student at Grand Valley State University. It started innocently enough. She met Christopher in a Christian group in 2011. He was 8 years older, socially awkward, and she was nice to him. He took her kindness as interest. He started asking her out. She said no. Not once, but multiple times. She thought he'd get the message. He didn't. He began overwhelming her with texts. He knew when her birthday was and bought her tickets to a game. She told him she wasn't interested and that she had no romantic interest in him. But he didn't hear her. He kept sending emotional messages, Bible verses, gestures that ignored the very clear boundaries that she had set. That quickly escalated, and he started following her and leaving her flowers and love notes. He watched her at practice, showed up at work. When she told him to stop, he didn't care. He said he didn't understand and that he just wanted closure. Samantha thought that she could handle it on her own. She downplayed it. She grew up fiercely independent with absent parents and had always believed that she had to manage things herself. But this behavior escalated. He was found sneaking into her apartment. He applied and was accepted for the same internship in Kansas City, just to stay close. A family friend eventually asked her if she had considered writing everything down. So she started writing. Every unwanted encounter, she kept notes for 2 to 3 years. And when she finally looked at what she had written down, she realized that what she was experiencing was stalking. She filed for a personal protective order. Michigan calls it a PPO. Other states use order protection. The judge reviewed her case and was extremely concerned. He granted the PPO for 6 years, the longest protection order he had ever given, and in my experience, a longer period of time that gets granted in most cases. For a while, Samantha's life returned to normal. She moved home to Michigan, started working in ministry, built her life again. Unfortunately, the protection order expired in 2020. By then, she was dealing with the loss of both her mom and her grandma. She started building her life. She bought a house, and for the first time in a long time, felt like an adult again. And then he resurfaced. He had changed. He was fit and confident. One of her friends said in her interview that he looked like he had been training for something. He joined the same soccer team, but ignored her on the field. At first, she didn't want to believe that he was dangerous. He got more aggressive with her on the soccer field, using any excuse to put his body on hers. Soccer had been the one thing that made her happy, and now she felt like she was losing even that. And then she noticed him showing up again and again at the grocery store, at her gym. Her friends started to worry. They suggested she get a gun. In Samantha's mind, her doors and windows were locked, and she kept a hatchet under her mattress. That should be enough to protect her. She wasn't sure if she had enough information to get another PPO. And this is where the justice system begins to fail. She filed again for a PPO and even attached the old one, pointing out that it had been granted for 6 years, but the court denied it. The letter said her request was denied because she had a complicated relationship with Christopher. Later, the court would explain, Samantha had not alleged sufficient specific facts to show that immediate and irreparable injury would occur prior to a hearing and that her ex parte PPO lacked a copy of the first order of protection. She was offered a hearing, but she was terrified. If he was notified, he'd know, and she feared he'd become angry. So she didn't pursue it. And here's where things get very dangerous. Because once the PPO was denied, he immediately began buying supplies for a bunker. You see the video of him buying all these materials to build a box. On October 7th, 2022, at 7 a.m., he broke into Samantha's house. She said she woke up to the sound of a floorboard squeaking. She could see a shadow behind the door. She thought about reaching for the hatchet, but before she could, he stormed into her bedroom, jumped on her, and started choking her. Having the confidence to act under pressure is so important when it comes to protecting yourself. You can have a hatchet, a knife, or a gun, but without the proper training, it doesn't matter. Samantha was afraid he would kill her right there, so she pretended to pass out. When she woke up, he was binding her hands and feet with handcuffs. Fearing for her life, she tried to say whatever might keep her alive. He said he just wanted to talk, but not here. He shoved a ball gag into her mouth and wrapped Gorilla Tape around the gag and into her hair. She mentioned not having the proper clothing on, and he told her that she wouldn't need them where they were going. He blindfolded her and drove her to a storage unit. Inside was a 7x7 soundproofed room. She could see the soundproofing from top to bottom and knew that no one would hear her scream. There were metal rings bolted to the walls. She said she felt like she was in a horror movie. She also notices a hot plate, some canned goods, water, a bucket for the bathroom. She wonders how long he plans on keeping her here. He gave her black pajama pants to wear. She says people are going to be looking for her. He tells her that he took her paddleboard to the lake so people would think she drowned. He had taken 2 weeks off of work so that they could spend time together. She started to ask him questions. She thought maybe if she could get him talking, he wouldn't kill her. He bragged about the tracker that he had on her car. He had been tracking her roommate, and her friend's car. He showed her the app and how he could follow her everywhere. She asked about the bunker and if he had built it. He smiled and proudly said yes, he built it himself. And he got the idea from the TV show You. Before I tell you the rest of the story, I want to go back to what I was saying about dark romance. If you're not familiar, You is a series about a guy named Joe Goldberg, a charming stalker who narrates his obsession as love notes. He spies, manipulates, kills, and yet, because of how the story is told, people find themselves excusing him. Women who watch the show describe him as hot. Memes say he's the boyfriend who would do anything for you. Now, I'll admit it, I'm kind of a nerd. I love the show Supernatural, and part of why I love it is because it's pure fantasy. I will never get the chance to hunt and kill monsters in real life. That's what makes it so safe. But dark romance is different. It's not slaying demons or chasing ghosts. It's about dynamics that can actually spill into reality. Women are accessible in real life. And unfortunately, women are vulnerable to attacks like this because many perpetrators are physically stronger than their victims. And because women disproportionately experience stalking and sexual violence, the risks are very real. So when a show like You packages obsession and control as entertainment, I get it, it's for the drama, but I don't agree with how much it gets romanticized. And thankfully, Penn Badgley, the actor that plays Joe, has spoken out about it. He said, he's a murderer, he's a sociopath, he's abusive, he's delusional, and he's self-obsessed. And that's exactly the point. Joe is not a hero. He's not a misunderstood romantic. He's dangerous. And when we start to blur that line, we risk normalizing behavior that's not just unhealthy, but life-threatening. And here you have Samantha Stalker in real life saying he related to Joe. So for women living in reality, that blur is not entertainment. It's life-threatening and terrifying. Back in the bunker, Samantha realized normal logic wouldn't work, not with someone who was this dangerous. So she tried to convince him that they could still be friends, that what he'd done wasn't a problem. So she played along, hoping to survive. But when he told her the only way he would believe her was if she slept with him, she felt panic and dread as she realized what he said. She tried to convince him otherwise. She told him she was seeing someone. That didn't matter to him. He didn't believe her. He left after she told him no. She began searching the room for a way out, but she found nothing. And so she decided if she had to, she would do it just to survive. He came back and she asked him, if I sleep with you, will you let me out? He said he would. They shook on it. She said that she knew that his integrity was important to him, and she believed that since he shook on it, she really would be free. Up until this point, watching Samantha in this documentary as she told her story, she stayed completely calm and non-emotional. You would never know that this woman had survived such a horrific crime. But when she talked about the rape, she cries for the first time. And it shows the devastation of sexual abuse. Not just the act itself, but the way it forces victims into impossible choices. She thinks about how long it had probably been since he had sex, if ever, that this would maybe be a short experience for her. But he tells her that he masturbates 12 times a day. He said it's going to take him a while. The assault was long and painful. It becomes so painful that eventually she breaks and she starts sobbing. He told her, that's all I wanted for so long. You can't imagine how long I've waited for that moment. You're the person I'm supposed to marry. After the rape, he holds up his part of the bargain. He lets her walk out of the storage unit, get in his car, and drives her back to where her car is parked. She knew that he was following her every move, so she drove straight home and called her neighbor. Her neighbor picks Sam up and they head straight to the hospital for a rape kit. Her awareness in that moment, knowing to immediately go to the hospital despite the fear that he might be following her, was extraordinary. The detective who got the call wasn't sure at first. He said it sounded like a crazy story. But when he showed up at the hospital and when he looked into her eyes, he knew. He's a specialist in sex crimes, and he could tell that what she had been through was horrible. The investigation moved quickly. They searched the bunker. It was exactly as she had described. Soundproofed, metal rings on the wall, and even sandbags on the outside of the box. They found GPS trackers, receipts, the sheets from the bed, the ball gag, handcuffs. They found pictures on his phone of her car, even her inside of stores. And yet, when he was questioned, he joked around. He said it was role-playing gone too far. He had even removed all of his hair to avoid leaving DNA. He had chemical burns on his body. One of the cops said that he looked across the table at Christopher and he saw pure evil. He had several phone calls with his mother from jail, one in which he told her that no matter what had happened, nothing could have stopped him from doing what he did to Samantha. The prosecutor initially charged him with home invasion, kidnapping, torture, aggravated stalking, and 4 counts of first-degree criminal sexual misconduct. At sentencing, Samantha stood in front of the same judge who once denied her protection order. She described being raped. She described the fear of never seeing daylight again. She asked for the greatest amount of time to protect herself and other women. He was sentenced to 40 to 60 years in prison. Samantha said at the end of this documentary, "Justice is a funny thing. It doesn't necessarily come in the form of prison years. I can't ever go back to before I was kidnapped. And that's something I had to grieve. Knowing that I'm finally turning the page of this and that I should feel safe with him off the street and that I'm protected meant a lot. I felt free. I did not picture myself surviving through that day. I'm thankful that I had family and friends that cared and helped me along the way. I want other women, whether they've been stalked or sexually assaulted or not believed, I want them to see my story and think things can change." You see on the screen at the end that 1 in 3 women will be stalked in their lifetime. 1 in 3. Samantha's story shows why that number is so devastating, and when the system doesn't protect victims, the consequences can be catastrophic. Some more statistics on stalking. 1 in 6 men will be stalked. Nearly half, or 46%, of all victims experience at least one violent incident by their stalker. 69% of female victims of stalking report being threatened with physical harm. In about 1 in 5 stalking cases, the stalker uses a weapon to threaten or harm the victim. In one study, 81% of women who are stalked by a former or current intimate partner were also physically assaulted by that partner. Around 31% of women stalked by an intimate partner also experience sexual assault from that partner. Stalking often precedes lethal violence in intimate partner cases. Multiple reviews link stalking behaviors to a markedly higher homicide risk. Here are some predictors of escalating violence. Certain factors increase the likelihood that a stalker will escalate their behavior to violence. Things like the stalker has a history of violence or criminal convictions. The stalker threatens the victim directly. The stalker displays extreme jealousy. Abuses drugs or alcohol. The stalker is unconcerned with the negative consequences. From the SPARC website, which stands for Stalking Prevention Awareness and Resource Center. While every case is different, people who stalk can be very dangerous. Stalkers may threaten, attack, sexually assault, and or even kill their victims. Unfortunately, there is no single psychological or behavioral profile that predicts what stalkers will or will not do. Stalkers' behaviors can escalate from more indirect ways of making contact, like phone calls or texts, to more direct contact, like delivering gifts or showing up where you are. Many victims struggle with how to respond to their stalkers. Some victims try reasoning with the stalker to placate them, hoping that being nice will make it stop. Many victims minimize their experiences of being stalked, telling themselves that it's not that bad. Still, others may confront or threaten their stalker or try to fight back. While victims cannot control the stalking behavior, they should feel empowered to take steps to keep themselves, their families, and their loved ones safe. These are some general tips for victims. Trust your instincts. Victims of stalking often feel pressured by friends or family to downplay the stalker's behavior, but stalking poses a real threat of harm. Your safety is paramount. Call the police. If you feel you are in any immediate danger, explain why the stalker's actions are causing you fear. Keep a record or log of each contact with the stalker. Be sure to document any police reports. Save evidence when possible. Stalkers often use technology to contact their victims. Save all emails, text messages, photos, and postings on social networking sites as evidence of the stalking behavior. You may also want to consider how to use your technology and your devices in a safer manner. For more information, please visit the National Network to End Domestic Violence Safety Net project. Get connected with a local victim service provider who can assist you in exploring your options as well as discuss safety planning. Statistics like these show just how widespread and devastating stalking can be, but numbers only tell part of the story. Behind each statistic is someone's life put on hold, someone waiting for the system to protect them. And that's where my own experience comes in, because I've been waiting too. You know that hearing I was so ready to have behind me? Well, it didn't happen, and it hasn't happened over and over again. I thought this time would be different. I really did. I hadn't even allowed myself to consider the possibility of it being pushed back again. In just a few short months, it'll be 3 years since this all started. 3 years. That's entirely too long to have something looming over my head. Just in writing this episode, we had another hearing that has come and gone, and guess what? They postponed that too. So with that being said, let's talk about this system we call our justice system. How does it work? How long does it take? And what do most people experience? I did some research, both online and with people I know personally. When we talk about the justice system, it's easy to imagine something clean and direct. A crime happens, someone's arrested, and justice follows all in an organized fashion. But in reality, it's not clean and it's definitely not organized. It's more like a labyrinth that everyone, including victims, families, and even the accused, gets pulled into. It begins with an arrest warrant. That's not just a cop knocking on a door. It's a judge saying, yes, there's enough here to bring this person in. Then the bail is decided, and that choice alone can shape everything that follows. Does this accused person get to wait at home, or do they sit in a cell while everything moves slowly? Then comes the preliminary hearing. This is where the question shifts to, is there enough to believe a crime happened and that this person did it? If it's a misdemeanor, sometimes things can end there with a plea. But with a felony, the stakes rise. If the hearing goes before a grand jury, which is a group of citizens, typically 16 to 23 members, depending on the state, who hears only the prosecution side behind closed doors and decides whether there's probable cause to bring charges. A victim is not required to be there for the preliminary hearing, but they have the right to be present at any hearing that the defendant is present. Sometimes the victim will be called to testify. In this stage of the process, at least in my state, we're just in general sessions. General sessions is the first court that the case has to go through. If the judge or jury, again, depending on what state you're in, decides that there's enough evidence, the case moves into circuit court. Now it pretty much starts again from the beginning. A whole new cycle, which includes motions, hearings, lawyers building their strategies, and arraignment. An arraignment is the formal court process where the defendant is informed of the charges against them and enters a plea such as guilty or not guilty. Another piece of this is prior offenses. Someone with no criminal history, no arrests, no convictions, they'll often get far more leniency. Judges tend to view them as less of a risk and more deserving of a second chance, which can mean lighter sentences, more probation, or fewer restrictions. On the other hand, when someone has a record, especially similar past offenses, that calls for a greater punishment. It can increase bail, extend sentencing, and strip away the benefit of the doubt. If someone has shown a pattern, if they've already been warned by the system before, how many chances should they get? And why should a victim have to wait until the pattern escalates to something catastrophic before accountability kicks in? I've gone through about 75% of this process already. We made it to the last steps. What I've yearned for more than anything in this process is closure. I thought that going to court for a second time for the final hearing would bring that. When it was postponed, it felt like my hope was completely broken. I've been in limbo with this process for 3 years now. 3 years is an incredible amount of time. This last postponement taught me that you can't hold on to outcomes. The only thing you can control is yourself, and trying to control other aspects of life gets exhausting. I have to believe that justice will be served, even if it's in a universal way, and even if it's not the justice I think is appropriate. I had so much wrapped up in this case, and when I let that go, I was able to make decisions for me, move forward, finally take a deep breath and consider myself, and to remember that my life is bigger than this waiting game. The first decision I've made is that I've started the journey to become a certified trauma-informed life coach. What that means is I'm learning not just the tools of coaching, but the deeper understanding of how trauma impacts our lives, our decisions, and our healing. Trauma-informed coaching is about creating safety, holding space, and helping people reclaim their power. For me, this is so much more than a certification. It's a way to take what I've lived through, what I've studied, and what I've shared on here, on the podcast, and turn it into something that I can directly support others with. And second, I finally have my own studio. After more than 13 years in photography, I have a space that's mine. It was something I always thought was out of reach, an unobtainable goal. But now I have it. It's my sacred space to create, a space where I can capture stories through photography and also have a home for this podcast. It's a marker of how far I've come and how much possibility there still is ahead. Both of these milestones, the trauma-informed coaching program and finally having my own studio, represent growth, healing, and reclaiming space in my life. And it feels right to share them here in this episode because just as I'm stepping into new chapters, I also want to honor the women whose stories remind us of how important safety, support, and awareness truly are. I am still in the process of setting up my studio, but I knew I needed to get this out on October 1st. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. The purple ribbon is the unifying symbol of this movement. Its history is hard to trace to a single origin, but it's been embraced across the country as a sign of courage, survival, in the ongoing fight to end domestic violence. Families and friends of victims use the purple ribbon to remember those who were lost to violence at the hands of someone they once loved and trusted. Shelters and victim service programs use it to raise awareness in their communities. You'll see purple ribbons in many forms, pinned to shirts at local events, embroidered on hats and bags, hung on doors, even draped across fences at crime scenes. Each display is both a memorial and a message that domestic violence has no place in our homes, neighborhoods, workplaces, or schools. And what I'll ask you is this. If you see a purple ribbon this month, pause. Remember what it stands for. Share the message. Support a local shelter or advocacy group. And if you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, know that resources and help exist. You are not alone. Thank you for sharing this space with me. And as always, stay familiar.